Hello, Harvard. This is the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Department at Harvard University.
This meeting won't be recorded, and please keep yourself muted during the panelists. I think there'll be time for Q&A at the end.
For the purposes of this conversation, there are two specific, I would say, student groups that I want to uplift. One being Latinx, specifically undocumented students. I'm currently in a state where the Tennessee state legislature proposed a bill that would charge tuition and or deny enrollment for undocumented students. And so in a lot of my doctoral work, I talked about how belonging is not just about what happens inside of an individual school building, but the ways in which also systems like state government can threaten the sense of belonging for Latina undocumented students.
Some of my little queenagers and gaybies think of me as a bit of an icon. I'm like, well, I'm not perfect. And so that when you see that pressure on yourself, you're like, no, don't do that. Don't heroize me in any kind of way. But post-election just had a lot of thoughts and emotions and feelings about it's like more than the election. It was really about our nation. It was about America. And I was upset of the hope that I held because it felt like a big, nope, we're not there, right? And, as someone that leans into optimism and the origami all the time, I had no origami for a few months.
And acknowledging that you can be both queer and trans, that transitioning was not about conforming to live a heterosexual lifestyle. As a gay trans man myself, he was the first person that I saw in history that I saw myself in ever in my life. And
how is self-care a point of resistance? How is that activism in and of itself?
Sort of talking about, we're these queer Black rappers, doing paying homage to James Baldwin. And what would he have to say about this particular moment? So there's songs on that project called DEI, which is sort of mocking a certain person in the administration who sort of was sort of mocking DEI. We have a song called Woke, where we're really sort of taking back and reappropriating that language. We have a song called The T, which sort of plays on Black queer vernacular and sort of how we introduce things into culture that are so revolutionary. So what I'll say connected to that and the creativity is hegemonic power seeks to overwhelm us, to reduce our experience as humans to pain, struggle, trauma, conflict, anguish, and fear. I believe that one of the most powerful ways to undermine and mock power, because as Michel Foucault wrote, where there's power, there's resistance, is to find joy in dance and music and flirting and eating food that tastes bad but good, and enjoying guilty pleasure. So that's what I lean into.
And there's been so much happening on Harvard's campus over the last year with all the organizing efforts. There's so much happening across the country, right? When we think of the type of legislative bills that are being proposed, all the grief that is also happening across the world, right? And
there's so much in history that is not spoken about or actively hid because of racism. Because, right now, I just started joining an organization here in New York City based out of Brooklyn called the Gender Liberation Movement. And so they are doing amazing work on intersectional movements and how to get community-wide activism going without a need for money or funding from private or nonprofits, and just through social want. I'll put their website on. They're an amazing organization.
Sometimes I'm thinking right now about the Trump administration and the attacks on corporations. I now am in the corporate environment, and how all of these lists of best LGBTQIA plus employers have now given a target list to anti-LGBT activists, because we, in some ways, our visibility has become an easier way to target folks. Nadia and Clark, both of you have been people that I've seen at protests or rallies recently. You all are showing up there. What are some other ways that you think folks can resist the current administration and things that they might not necessarily agree with, besides showing up at the movements, at the rallies, at the protests, because that might not always feel like the safest, most comfortable place for everybody. So what are some other ways that you might suggest in addition to those, right? Like, yeah, join Clark and Nadia at the rallies. They are amazing. Give them a megaphone, and I will just sit back and cheer them on. But what are some other ways?
The first thing that comes to mind that's sort of the closest to that is there's so many local elections that are happening now or about to happen, and there's lots of ways to phone bank or canvas or host virtual events to support candidates that you want to see in our government. And those are the folks that want to have the most impact on our day-to-day lives, and also are the people who will then eventually hopefully be lifted up and be the change that we see at the higher level. It takes a lot of time, but those are the folks that, if they're the people that represent us, that they'll be there for a while, hopefully, if we can support them. More and more, we can let people know who might be against us or might just not even have the information, just not even be thinking about the LGBTQ community, especially the trans community, that we're all impacted by the gender binary, that we are all oppressed by this. Like, we've all been told that we can or cannot do something because of our gender, and that if we can liberate ourselves from that, we all will be better. And it's something that everyone can relate to. And so I think meeting folks at that place, instead of coming in like, how did you not know this? Which is so easy to do, which when I was first getting radicalized, when I was first learning, I was like, oh my God, how did you not know this? Like, I was just like so awake, but it's like, no, I just learned it. Like, it's not an expectation I can have for someone else in my grown hindsight. And I think take that into those conversations that we're all learning, and the openness is what's important.
We're in the struggle together. It's real. And I don't want to dismiss that. There's a lot of narrative right now, especially in Tennessee, around these legislative bills that, in my opinion, are anti-immigrant, are anti-American. And at the same time, it's really important that we are like elevating the voices of youth, right? And right now, I feel like what's happening is specifically in Tennessee. I can't speak for the rest of the country, but in Tennessee, the narrative is one-sided. And I have to constantly remind educators, whether that's deans of students, teachers, student support coaches, that right now, to be in public education, pre-K-12 specifically, it's under attack. And there is an echo chamber of just one viewpoint and one perspective. And we need to really be intentional about being strategic and countering that with, what Clark talked about, like the stories, right? We talked a lot about self-care, but like reminder around like collective care and what does it mean to build together.
I have so much hope. But it's being chipped away very quickly with every new executive order. This country claims it's a country of immigrants. We know historically that's only accurate for some people. And so the idea that every branch of the government is being weaponized to choke off access to work, access to being able to pay rent, being able to utilize the monetary system, canceling social security numbers. I mean, they're killing the ability for immigrants who did come here legally, who are here legally, even if they're not, to not be able to just live, to exist in this physical space of this land. It's really scary. That's a scary space. And if you haven't, I'd really recommend reading Project 2025. It is a evilly but so thoughtfully curated book that has every nuance and exploitation of the Constitution that hadn't been used before. But it is a great example of how when you don't understand who you're fighting against, they're going to win. And that scares me. That really scares me, that they're exploiting every the three branches of government in ways that, which unfortunately weren't intended to be. So I'm not going to blame that, but it's that makes me lose hope very quickly.
And elders have the knowledge and the power to share what they have experienced with youth. And we need to be working together. There is, I think, not enough understanding of how intertwined all these issues are. So I think a lot of my hope comes from, the deep roots of those intersections. That, immigrant issues, our trans issues, our queer issues, our racial issues they're all so deeply connected. And I think that we can learn from each other tremendously, and we have to, because what they have and what you're speaking to about, know your enemy, they're cohesive. They have this collective, succinct, thought out idea. And one of my biggest critiques of the left is that we don't. It is not cohesive. It is not collective. We are all filled with infighting and lateral violence. And so my hope is that with creating spaces that are more intergenerational and community driven, that bring people of all these different voices and issues together, we can start to understand the common ground and really push forward. So I just hope that someday soon I'll have a conversation with somebody that does not include a question about how I'm doing, with the implication that things are really hard right now to be a trans person and to be a person doing this work, to be a queer person, that it just, I just don't want that question anymore. I want it to not happen. And I think we can get there. I am a hopeful, optimistic person, but it takes time.
And a couple of weeks ago, we had a rally here in Chattanooga called Education for All. Y'all, we have fourth graders. I'm gonna say that one more time. Fourth graders up there calling people by name, letting senators know this is not okay. And they were speaking with so much courage and tenacity. And they were the organizers. And just, I am hopeful about this next generation of saying no, no mas, right?
Thank you to the Reagan Fund, who generously supported financially so that these panelists can be paid for their time. That's an important part of, using Harvard's resources for good. And so, Michael, any words to close us out in this last little bit?
No, I just want to thank everyone on the panel, all the students, all the other people who came, whose names I didn't even recognize. But I do think that one of the purposes for the class is to actually do engaged learning and to bring it out into the world, and you've all brought the world into us, which is the other way that goes. And I certainly hope that this actually is not just inspirational, that sounds sentimental, right? But that it's really informative and it really helps people think things through in what's clearly a very bad time.